This is Relationship Truth Unfiltered, a podcast that ditches destructive traditions and delves into real biblical teaching about relationships. Welcome. I'm Julie Sedenko here with Mary, a woman who attended our recent Conquer conference where our theme was resilience. We had a private Facebook group for everybody that attended, and Mary wrote a post that caught Leslie's attention. And Leslie wanted you and the rest of our podcast listeners to hear her incredible story. Our hope is that after hearing this episode, you will feel empowered to face adversity and find strength in your own life. Mary, welcome.
Thank you, Julie. It is an honor and a privilege to be here with you today.
Well, we thank you so much. And I hope you don't mind me sharing your age. You are 67 years old.
And proud of it.
Very good. I love that. And you've been married for just 16 years. So
Yes.
is this a second marriage?
No, this is actually a third marriage,
A
Julie.
third marriage.
hmm
Okay. And that's probably because you said you've experienced abuse since you were a baby.
Yes. I was born into a violent alcoholic home. And I grew up in violence from both of my parents. And then as my oldest brother became a teenager, there was violence from him and violence from a grandparent. And then I was married 19 and a half years to my first husband. And he was not abusive, not physically abusive, but emotionally, horribly abusive. And I did not want my kids to grow up in a broken home, and I thought I could fill in for the shortage of his abuse. And so I was the overdoer. I did everything, hoping that they could have a normal home. But when they were 10 and 12 and 15, he completely abandoned me and them. 3 years later, I entered a second marriage because my girlfriend says he did the schmooze thing. He took my boys and taught them how to shoot a gun. He took them hunting. He bought pizza and came over and helped them do homework. And it, he, he passed the test with all of my family and all of my friends. So we dated about a year and we got married. 3 months later, he was sleeping with somebody else.
Oh,
And so that didn't last very long at all.
I bet not.
And then it was about, I dated my husband I knew my husband that I'm married to now for 8 years before we got married. We dated for 2 years and then I let him go because he wouldn't get married. And so there were red flags all along, but I was not mature enough or developed enough to see it. And Julie, there's this like a continuum. So when you grow up abused or you're in abuse, you're like here
Meaning like at the bottom, at,
at
at,
the
at a
bottom,
zero, let's
the
say a
bottom
zero.
of development, let's say.
Okay.
Not the not the bottom of personality or worth or value, but the bottom of development. It actually maybe negative development. How do you have a healthy relationship when all you know is that people have battered you? So the first time somebody comes along, this is how my PTSD therapist explained it to me, is that the first time somebody comes along who is maybe just one or two notches above what you grew up in, you are going to grab onto that and you are going to hold on to it no matter what it takes because you think you've reached that higher level.
Right. But you're really just a couple notches above some of the worst. So
Right, exactly.
if you grew up in a 1 or a 2 and you find somebody who's at a 4, it seems like heaven, but it's really
Yes,
still a destructive, unhealthy person.
right.
Describe some of the issues in this current marriage that you've been in. What has made it destructive to you or abusive?
There's two main things. One is his personality, and two is that I was taught in my Christian training that if a wife is submissive to her husband, that God will use that to change him. So I thought it was my job to endure whatever came my way because eventually God was going to turn this around for my good. But what it actually did is made him feel entitled and it entrenched him in his patterns because if you're getting rewarded every time
Exactly.
you abuse somebody, you're going to get worse. If you allow disrespect, you're going to get more disrespect. That's just the way God made human beings.
It's one of the worst teachings that our church, "Oh, just keep submitting, just love him, just forgive."
Yep,
And it's an enabling of sin.
I think it's out of ignorance, Julie. I think they mean well. But I have said to my pastor over the years, like I would be like totally dejected and depressed and just near tears at church. And he would come up to me and say, "Hi, how's things going?" And I might say something that my husband said or did. And he'd say, "Mary, look for the good."
Oh my gosh.
They don't realize
And you know what? It's one thing to mean well, but when you have so many women, just open your eyes and see this is not working and you are hurting women. You are not making healthy marriages.
you're being destructive.
And you might feel successful because she's still wearing a
Hmm.
ring on her finger, but she's being abused, and you are not calling out this man's sin and calling him to a higher level of walking with the Lord. And it's wrong. And, it needs to change.
Julie, this is why I'm so excited about Leslie's materials. A year and a half ago, I made the decision. I didn't make the decision right at first, but a few weeks later, I was at a point where I needed to leave, but I didn't want to disobey God. I actually got on the internet and went looking for biblical evidence that it's okay to leave an abusive marriage. The first material I found was on Focus on the Family. Uh, her last name is Darby Strickland's material.
Darby Strickland,
Yes, I've
yes.
heard you guys mention her. Yes. Next, I found Leslie's material. I've been in PTSD therapy for 3.5 years, but a year and a half ago, I was still not at a place where I was thinking clearly all of the time. So when I first joined Conquer, all I did was listen to Leslie's videos in the library, one after another. I bet I've listened to every video like 6 times because every time I had 5 minutes, or might be washing dishes or this or that or the other thing, I'd have a video going because I wanted to reinforce this material. It was like the first time I read the Bible. I couldn't get enough of it. Um, but to get back to what you asked me was the reasons for the destructive marriage is the abuse, constant, continual dishonesty, deceit, manipulation. Those are the three things that constantly come at me. And when you're taught that you have to submit to this, you make it okay in your head. And then you go on as if everything's okay until the next episode. And each episode gets worse till you're at the point where, if you're a strong person like me, you've got a lot of abuse piled up and you're a mess.
Give me some examples of what this manipulation and deceit looked like in your marriage.
Well, the first deceit I discovered was we I lived here in North Dakota, not too far from his farm, for 6.5 years. I came here for that second marriage, and it only lasted a very short while, less than a year. And then I started going to my current husband's church, and he asked me out. We dated for 2 years, but he wouldn't get towards marriage, so I stopped dating him. I moved back to Illinois in 2004 because my family asked me to. And then he started calling me and writing letters. And then he invited me to come here. Our town turned 100, and the town near here turned 100. He asked me to come for the celebration. And so he proposed during that celebration time. And he said, "Whatever we have to do to get to marriage, that's what we'll do." And I said, "Well, if you're talking about a good old fashioned biblical courtship, I'd consider that." So we started courting long distance. He was approved by my family. He was approved by my small group at my church. So part of the courting was, what is our life going to look like? And he had told me about the abuse from his parents and his brother, and that there's no way that we could be married and live on that farm and farm with them because they would abuse me. They had abused him his whole life. And so the plan was, he's a very wealthy man. And the plan was that he was going to look for a farm and buy it, and we were going to farm on that farm, and that he would separate from them. And when our premarital and when you're in a good church, they make you take premarital counseling. And at the end of premarital counseling, the counselor said, "Is there anything you're afraid of?" I said, "I'm afraid he's not going to separate from his family." And he's, "Oh, yes, I have all the money in the world. I'm going to buy a farm and I'm going to separate. And I've waited too long. I never should have stayed with them this long," that kind of thing. And then every couple months he would tell me all about this farm that he had checked out and that he had put a bid in on it. And I think he was actually doing those things, Julie. But we were married about 2 months when he announced that he wasn't actually looking for a farm anymore because he shouldn't be expected to spend money on our own farm when we could just farm with the farm that he already had with his family. So that was the first major deceit right there.
What did that do to you? That's a big one.
The It was a crushing blow. I told him, I said, "I'm hurting so badly right now. I can't talk to you. I can't even think straight." So that's the first time I made an appointment to see a counselor. I said, "Well, what do I do with this?" But as Leslie has indicated in many of her videos, most counselors aren't qualified to counsel in abuse cases.
Right.
Most pastors aren't qualified to counsel in abuse cases. So I didn't get the help I needed until about 3.5 years ago with a really good PTSD therapist.
So you stayed on the family farm?
And I thought, well, I will make the best of it. I don't want to be that person I don't want to be the woman who's divorced 3 times. What will my kids think of me?
Yeah.
You know, how would my life be if I'm divorced 3 times? Looking back, I should have got an immediate divorce or annulment.
Yeah.
I should have known that this was just based on deceit. But I thought things like, and the counselors said things like, he's having separation anxiety. He's lived on this farm his whole life. Give him some time. In 5 years, he'll be off this farm. So I thought I could make it work. I thought it could work.
But it got worse. Give me some ideas of some of the more destructive things that began to happen.
Well, he kept pushing me to work 19 hours a day. And he would say things like, "My 82-year-old mother can do more work in a day than you can." And he made up a lot of lies that I didn't realize were lies. He would tell me all of the stuff his mother did on the farm. And then I found out later she did all of those things for 2 weeks while his father had surgery. Only 2 weeks of her entire life she did those things.
Okay.
And he made it sound like it was an everyday thing. So I kept thinking, my body will build up. My body will get stronger. I'll get used to it. I should be able to do these things. I'm going to do them.
Give me an idea of what these things are.
So an old-fashioned dairy farmer with a stanchion barn, you get up at 4 a.m. You eat a quick breakfast on the run. I'm talking 5 minutes. You get all your gear on. You drive 5 miles to the farm. At least we don't live on the farm. Our house is off the farm, but we were there 19 hours a day. So you drive to the farm, and it takes about an hour to get ready to milk cows. So you're getting equipment ready, you're getting solution ready that you're going to wash cows' teats with, um, and you're getting set up to milk cows. So then there were 40 cows, 20 on each side. He milked 20 and I milked 20. The equipment is heavy. So you're bending down, you're washing a cow, you're getting back up, you're picking up this heavy equipment, you're hooking it up underneath the cow so you bend back down. Then you've got to bend back down to check the cow. Then you've got to bend back down to take it off the cow and wash the cow. And I did this with 20 cows. The process takes 2 hours. So you start milking by about 5:30. You're done between 7 and 7:30. And then you take the cows with a four-wheeler out to a pasture where they spend the day. Then I come home and I cook dinner for 4 people. His parents were in their 80s. So I cooked, and what they call dinner is what we call lunch in Illinois. It's the noon meal. And I cooked lunch for 4 people. And then come back to my place, fix lunch for 4 people, take that out to the farm and serve lunch. Then come home and do things like laundry, mending, all the normal things, mow grass, pay bills, check the mail, open the mail, all the normal things, get groceries that people do to live. And then by 4:30, be back out to the farm with supper. Bring supper to the farm, feed 4 people, and then milk cows. And then you're there doing other work, you're doing other farm work, and you get home and you eat supper at about 10 p.m. and you're in bed at 11. And you get up at 4 and repeat, and that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Well, I feel lazy.
Just you are
Because
normal, Julie, and I
oh
was
my goodness.
insane.
And when you talked about mowing, you're not talking about, a little bit of grass. He had quite a bit for you to mow.
Yeah, the first year we were married, he rented an empty farmhouse. And it was acres and acres and acres of mowing. We were there a year and then we bought our own home, and he dreamed of a tree grove and a big yard. So he created a yard and a tree grove. There's 5 hours of mowing twice a week and 2 hours of trimming twice a week. I did all of that. I don't anymore,
Oh, good.
but I did all of that for a long time
Ugh,
because I wanted to be a good wife.
wow, there'd be some dead trees if that was my yard. I'm just I just try to keep the plants on the porch alive, but, um, so he would really, though, berate you,
Yes,
and
very
he
much.
he called you a lot of names.
Yes, he did.
He was also quite controlling when it came to finances. Do you wanna talk about that?
Oh, very much so. So when we first got married, he would say things like, I farmers don't make much money. So you've got to just, buy secondhand clothing, make do. We cannot spend a lot of money because we don't make much money. In my mind, the trade-off was I'm working beside my husband, the dream of a lifetime. My children hopefully eventually will get used to me being here. My adult children will come and visit, and we'll have some fun times on the farm, and maybe they can come for harvest and planting, and we would have some. It's a trade
Mhm.
off, right? I was willing to make the trade. Uh, but what happened is, if I bought a pair of shoes or an outfit for church, I would get raked over the coals. I mean, and so that just makes you want to not buy things. Or if I bought something for the house. Julie, I was a single mother for a lot of years. And I helped raise 3 kids on my own. And before, when the husband was there, he was the same way this husband is. Don't spend a nickel. So I never had a complete set of dishes or a complete set of silverware. And I know lots of women I've talked to who are in abuse who are in the same thing. We don't have normal lives. So in this marriage, if I were to buy a new coffee pot or a teapot, he would say, "You don't need that. Take that back."
But this is a wealthy man.
Yeah, this is a very wealthy man. He owns 6 quarters of land. A quarter of land is 360 acres. He owns a barn, equipment. He has like 8 tractors. Everything he has for farming. He's been farming for 45 years. He owes money on nothing. He's never borrowed a nickel except the first year he farmed, he borrowed money from his folks, and then he paid that back. So he's never paid interest on a loan. He still has the first nickel he ever earned because to not to his credit, but to understand him a little bit, he grew up in poverty.
Yeah,
So hoarding money is his security.
right.
And me spending money like on a new pair of boots or shoes, well, I'm threatening his security. That's how the counselor explained it.
He actually put money in accounts with that you had no access to.
Yep, when we first got married, of course, everything was in his name. He was single for a long time. And I said, I think things should be in both our names. So he begrudgingly, little by little, as the years went by, put my name on some stuff. But he still has his name on several accounts that my name is not on. So, for example, about a year and a half ago, I started hunting on the internet for material that to leave this marriage, and I found Focus on the Family, and Darby Strickland was on there and gave information about you don't have to live in abuse. And then I found Leslie's material and Conquer, started listening to all of her videos. So I had made up my mind that I am going to strongly consider leaving, and I said it out loud to my PTSD therapist. I want to know if it's okay to leave, and I want to discover whether I should leave. I want to just look at all the options and look at whether or not this marriage is something salvageable. Can it be turned around? Do I want to turn it around? And within just a few weeks, I decided, no, I'm leaving. Well, at that time, I decided that I'm not going to live like this anymore. If I need shoes, I'm going to buy shoes. If I need a pants, I'm going to buy pants. If I need short sleeve and long sleeve shirts, I'm going to buy both. I have to go back to work. I'm going to need some bookkeeping clients. I need some I can't go in the clothing that I have that's all tattered and worn out and stained. So I just started using his checkbook and I just started writing checks, and of course, that did not go very well at all. He was very angry.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. I see you sitting there feeling stuck. Okay, I don't actually see you. Don't be freaked out. But I can imagine you sitting there, tired of the same old patterns. Maybe you've been through things that have left you feeling small, like your story is out of your control. But let me tell you something. It's not too late to change that. It's really not. The Empowered to Change program was made for women just like you. Women who are ready to stop just surviving and start thriving. Imagine finally knowing how to handle challenges, problems without losing the person that you want to be. Setting boundaries that protect your peace and your heart. Living a life that feels strong, purposeful, and yours. This isn't just another online course. It is a 6-month journey with expert coaches who will walk with you every step of the way. It is not about quick fixes. This is about real transformation. Listen, I know life hasn't been fair, but you have the power right now to say, this is not how my story is going to end. So here is your next step. Go to leslievernick.com/empowered. Put this on pause and do it right now. You don't have to figure this out alone. We are here to help. Your breakthrough is waiting. Let's write a new chapter starting today. At what point did you say, I've hit a wall, I can't take anymore? You said you did decide finally to leave. What was there an incident that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back?
There sure was, but I'd like to give you 2, 3 minutes of background first. So, before we got married, my first husband had abandoned me and my 3 kids when they were 10 and 12 and 15. And he told them a lot of lies, and that alienates your kids from you a little bit. And I had worked very hard at reestablishing healthy relationships with them. And we had just gotten to a point where we had gone on 2 family vacations a year apart, where I rented a condo and we spent time together. Not a condo, a house in Denver, and we had a fireplace and rented movies and ordered pizzas, and we spent quality time together. So when I married my current husband, I said, this is what happened. This is what I've done to get my kids back. This is the pattern. So once every year, you and I are going on a family vacation with my kids, and this is not negotiable. And of course, he agreed. But then he started wheedling me to try to get me to stop doing these trips. And it was just, he ruined them. He completely. So the first trip he went on, but he didn't participate in much. And the second trip, he said he would go, and the day before the trip, he said, "I'm not going." The day before, he said, "I'm not going." And then, so then I decided, okay, then I'm going every year without him. And so then I would go on a trip, and he would pressure me to not go and try to make me feel bad about going. So he's just been pretty destructive. So Julie, the straw that broke the camel's back, to get back to your question, is I have a a daughter that's single that lives in Jacksonville, Florida. She's a teacher. Never been married, waiting for the right person to come, no kids. I have a son that's single that lives in Fargo, North Dakota that I see once in a while. Single, not married, no kids. I have one son who's married in Denver, Colorado. Um, Beautiful family. He and his wife both had full-time jobs before they had a child. But they have a daughter who just turned 8 a couple days ago. She has severe autism. So his wife doesn't work, and they felt like they could not travel, in her earlier years because they didn't know how she would react to being in a car. So when she turned, I think it was 5, they said, "Okay, next summer, we'll try coming out to your place in North Dakota." So she was going on 6 that summer. They had never been here before, and here was the deal: we'll make the trip, but if she starts screaming and doesn't stop, we turn around and we go home. It turned out she was a champion in the car. So they came for their first time. Now, you remember me telling you I wasn't allowed to buy anything for the house. So the first time they were coming, I had to spend about $7,000 just to make the house decent for company to come. We had a mattress in a guest room that I wouldn't let a dog sleep on. So I bought a new mattress and box spring. I bought some, and I'm talking about Walmart and Target. I'm not talking about expensive things here. But I bought shelving to put toys in, and I bought dolls and toys and sensory things for autistic children. And I just made things look nice. And of course, he had a fit about that. This gist of the story is I've worked really hard to to make these relationships with my kids happen, to get it where my son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter come here each summer to create something with grandparent and grandchild. And the first time they came, he did his usual thing. He had a few meals with them, but basically he ignored them. And the next year, the same thing. Um, so the next year, it was only 2 times they came actually. So the next year was a year ago. And when they came, my granddaughter had gotten into playing with sand on the playground, which was a big deal. I don't know if you know anything about autistic children, but every tiny new thing they do is a huge accomplishment. So I bought a little 36-inch swimming pool and wanted to fill it with sand. So I bought 50-pound sacks of sand. Now, my husband lifts up 100-pound calves and carries them. So it's not a big deal to ask him to pick up a 50-pound sack of sand and bring it by the pool for me. So I asked him to bring the sand by the pool so I could put it in. And my kids, my son and daughter-in-law, were on the patio in lawn chairs. My granddaughter's there playing on the patio with some toys. And I asked him to put sand over by the pool. And he says, "Next thing you know, you're going to be asking me to clean it up after they go home." And he started being belligerent to that was the only phrase. He was belligerent to me, he was belligerent to them, and then he was having a fit because my granddaughter wasn't putting the sand where he thought the sand should go. She was putting it on the jungle gym, and she was putting it on the patio, and sand should stay in the sandbox. He just was it was to the point where they said, "We're not sure we're coming next year." And then this year they canceled because they didn't wanna be with him again. They're never coming here again.
So, at some point in all of this, you said you went to the internet. You started to look for resources. You found, I think you mentioned Darby Strickland, and we'll have a resource to her in the show notes. But you found Leslie, and you ended up joining Conquer. You've really studied her teaching and her videos, and
I sure have.
give me some of the big aha moments in your learning, and how have you applied it to your life? What has really caused a change in Mary?
About the same time that I found Leslie's materials online, and I just started listening to her videos in the library nonstop. I didn't participate in any of the group stuff yet because I didn't have what my PTSD therapist calls. I wasn't able to stay in my thinking brain all the time like I am now. I was still being pulled into PTSD many times each day. So I would just bombard myself with her material. But some of the things were, I started, for the first time, I said to my counselor, I said, I'm in a horrible marriage and I need to get out. And I found this Conquer website and I'm listening to these videos. And I would talk to him about the material and he reinforced all of it. And it made me realize, Julie, that I had been abused my whole life in all of my marriages. And I wasn't having it. I'm not having it anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. As soon as I can get out, I'm getting out. It's the healthy, right thing to do. So some of the stuff that has stuck out to me from Leslie's material has been like to put words, to give me a vocabulary. I already know all this stuff that's happened, but I didn't have a vocabulary to describe it. And, what gaslighting is, and what covert abuse is, and that verbal and emotional abuse is just as destructive as breaking someone's arm, and that scripture does not say a woman should submit to abuse, and that God does not want. One of the things that stuck out to me most about Leslie's teaching that I value most is, and she said it in several videos, is that God created marriage as this special relationship where you can have safety, love, respect, and honor. And before I die, I'd sure like to know what that feels like.
Yeah. How did you begin, Mary, to take what you were learning and apply it to your life? You sound like you were a pretty strong person anyway.
My counselor said I'm the strongest woman he's met.
So, how did you begin to apply it to your life?
Okay, so I would hear something on Leslie's teaching, or an aha moment would come from a combination of her teachings and things I've read in books before or heard before. And I would go to my PTSD therapist. I see him once a week and I'd say, I heard this. What do you think? And then he would say, and what he started seeing was, he would say, how could you not know that you were being abused when your husband did these things? But as he has seen, Julie, is that it's that what I told you before about the continuum. You grow up in this, and if you're getting this,
Just a little bit better. Yeah.
you don't realize or you realize it's bad, but you've been told by the church and your pastor and other counselors that are uninformed, if I stay in this, God will use it to turn this whole thing around, and it's going to turn around and it's going to become great. So I would go to the counselor and I'd say, and I heard this. Should I say this? And he'd say, no, say it like this. And then I actually write things out on 3x5 cards and I go over them and over them so that the next time my husband says something ridiculous, it just pops right out of my mouth. I don't even have to think about it.
You are literally the definition of taking the bull by the horns and writing your own story. I mean, honestly, I'm younger than you, and I was tired reading all of the things that you are doing. And it's really something about how you've been abused for so long. You've been through 3 marriages, you've been beaten down, your kids are far away from you, and yet you're starting a discipleship group through your church.
I already did.
You're 67 years old, earning a bachelor's degree in accounting,
I'm almost done.
planning another degree in nonprofit management,
Yes.
and a master's in business
Yes,
administration.
ma'am.
You're working on acquiring clients for an oil and gas accounting consultant business.
So in 2015, when I went to work for this accounting firm, they were hired to transition an oil operator from keeping track of everything in Excel spreadsheets to oil and gas software. I set up their oil and gas software. The gal that fed me all of the information lives in Dallas, Texas, but she does like a good part. She did a good part of their bookkeeping. She's the person who called me a month ago and said they're going to fire their CPA firm. They'd like you to come work for them if you're in the field. And if, if you're on your own and you can do it. So 2 days ago, she called me and said, "Yes, they'd like to hire you."
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's incredible. And on top of all of this, you're looking at starting an autism center?
Yes, that's the dream. So the accounting and bookkeeping is twofold. One, I had a quilting business and I couldn't make enough money at it to be semi-retired, and I didn't think I should have to go back to work full time and take whatever jobs available. So I thought if I can get a good enough fee for the bookkeeping slash accounting, I can do that part time while I'm going to college and working on starting the autism center.
And then in your spare time, you're working with this PTSD therapist to overcome all of this complex trauma, restore broken relationships with your adult children. I mean, it is, like I said, the definition of writing your own story. So all of these difficult, abusive, hard things have happened, and it would be very easy. And I don't even know that people would blame you for saying, I'm a victim. I'm 67 years old. There's nothing I can do. But you've done the polar opposite and said, guess what? I'm writing the end of my story. And so I want for you to tell us, Mary, how do you get in that kind of a mindset? How do you go from this hurt and this pain, rightfully, even anger, which is righteous and right, and anybody would understand, to deciding to do something different and not stay stuck in that? How do you get in that mindset?
Okay, so you cannot do it by yourself. You must have a counselor. For me, if you've been abused a lot, if I wasn't in PTSD therapy, I wouldn't be where I am. I think you must have training to overcome the damage that's been done to your brain and your emotions and your personality and recover from that to move forward. So, I looked at some of the interviews on your podcast when I was new and I thought, wow, I can't wait to get where they are. And as I was preparing for this interview with you, Julie, I thought people might look at this interview and think, oh, she's got it all together now. I have days where I'm angry all day. I have days where there's this voice that says, just give up, just give up. It's the decision. It's a conscious decision to say, I will not give up. I will write my own new story. And it's all the things you are doing, you're pouring into yourself. About 6 months ago, I decided I'm just dropping out of everything I'm doing until God gives me clear direction in what I should be doing or what will help me develop. Um, I was doing way too many things. I was over functioning. And so I worked with my counselor on stop over functioning. And then my church had this training for discipleship group. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I get to do this now because I'm not over functioning. So now there's time in my schedule for this. And my education is a high priority. My kids come first, and my education is at the top of the list.
Excuse me,
And
when you say that you were over functioning, give me an example. What did that look like? How were you over functioning?
oh, if they needed cookies at church for something, I'd be baking cookies. They needed somebody to lead a Bible study, I'm leading the Bible study. If I need somebody to work at the information counter, I'm working at the information counter. If they asked for help and I didn't do it, I would feel this horrible guilt. Or and it wasn't necessarily just church, it was family. If a family member called to say something was going on, I would volunteer to bail them out. I was just completely or this is a really cool new thing that just developed in the last 2 months. So when this potential client called a month ago and said, might have some work for you, there was that temptation to drop everything I'm doing and give that full attention. But I resisted the temptation because I have new training now. And I said, well, I'm going on a trip. My mother just passed away, and I'm gonna go tend to family now for a little while. So I can't do anything right this minute. Can you wait a few weeks?" And the whole while, Julie, in my heart, there's this churning like, oh, if I don't give them something right away, if I don't make plans right away, they're not going to want me. And then the new trained Mary said, if I don't get this client, that's okay. God will have a new one. I'm going to do this in a healthy way. And I spent 11, 12 days taking care of my family in Illinois. And just today, I turned in an engagement letter for to the new client. So, mm, it's training. It's deciding, and it's doing the work to become healthy is painful. It's hard, and it's over a long period of time. So if you're not up for those 3 things, then quit now and give up. But I just recently, with the help of my counselor, wrote a letter to, each of my 2 boys. And the ending paragraph was, "My story is not done being written yet." So I love that you brought that up a
Mm.
little while ago.
And, talking about working with the counselor, you shared with me earlier that you had hired a counselor and realized after just a couple months that you basically couldn't stand her or it just wasn't a match. And
Yeah, it wasn't a match.
and so I think that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that that person was bad or but recognizing and instead of just continuing to pay this person and not have it be a match or say, "Oh, I tried counseling and it didn't work."
Right.
You went and you continued until you found this person that's really helping you and is in addition to even what you're doing with Leslie, so you can take some of the things that you're learning with Leslie and,
Mhm.
Leslie also offers some of her more, um, intense small group coaching programs that
I'm in one.
which one are you doing now?
It's walking in core strength. Okay, so there's one more meeting left. And then I already signed up during the conference when I didn't know anything about the Empowered to Change one coming up in January, but I think it was Leslie that announced that it's available. Boy, I jumped on that.
And Empowered to Change, it really is about walking you through this process of no longer being a victim. And it doesn't just have to be marriage problems, it can be any type of issue, struggle that you're having in your life and learning how to write your own story. And I think you're going to be just so successful at this because you've already got the mindset,
Thank you.
Mary. I really do.
Thank you. Julie, I'd like to throw
Please.
just this little tidbit out there for people. I said this something similar to my son recently. If you broke your arm, you wouldn't spend 2 minutes thinking about going and getting your arm set at the
Mhm.
emergency room. If somebody crashed in your car and you couldn't drive it, you wouldn't sit there and say, "Oh, I can't drive my car anymore. I better start walking to work." You would take it to the shop and have it fixed. So, I'm not sure why, but there is this thing that happens to women when we're abused, when we're horribly abused.
Yeah,
We somehow think that can't be fixed. And God says in His Word, it can be.
it can.
One of my favorite verses is in Romans, and it says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." There you have it.
Well, I don't know if there's anything else to say after that. That's just absolutely incredible. And maybe that is your one piece of advice, but I always like to ask that question. If you could offer one piece of advice to a woman who's listening, who's in a similar situation, talk to her.
If you have been abused in any way for any amount of time, if you've been abused the first time, go get a counselor. If you don't get help, get a different one. I have been through 4 or 5 counselors at one time when I moved and had to seek a new counselor. If you have been abused for a certain amount of time and you feel so beaten down that you can't get out of bed, I've been there. And you think, "I cannot even get up out of bed." Get up out of bed. Get into the internet. Get in the yellow pages. Find a counselor. Call a friend. Call a pastor. call the Domestic Violence Crisis Center. Go to some domestic violence crisis center meetings. Do whatever it takes. Take the first step. You are valuable to God. You're valuable to yourself. You're valuable to your family. You might not remember it anymore. You might not think so. You might not know it. You are valuable. God has great work for you to do. He can take anything you've been through, He can use it for your good, and He can use it for great good if you will do the hard work to get there.
Mary, thank you for being an incredible example of doing the hard work, of writing your own ending to your story. And I speak for everybody listening when I say we just wish you nothing but God's blessing and the best as you continue to do that.
Thanks, Julie. It's one of the most exciting times in my life.
I love that.
It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in today. Before you go, I need to tell you something important, something I don't want you to miss. Your story, yes, your story, is far from over. I know life hasn't been easy. Maybe you've been through things that left you feeling stuck, broken. But hear me on this. You are so much more than the hard things you've faced. If you're thinking, I don't know how to change this, you don't have to figure it out alone. You'll get professional coaching and a small group of women on a similar journey in our Empowered to Change program. You'll go through a step-by-step process of learning how to think differently, how to set boundaries that protect your heart, and how to reclaim the strength and joy that are inside you. This is your moment, not next week, not next year, right now. Go to leslievernick.com/empowered to find out more and sign up, because your story deserves a better ending. Let's write it together. Take care of your heart, friend. Until next time.